The sound of the gunshot echoed through the valley like a scream trapped in the throat of the earth. I dropped the feed bucket I was holding, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. My boots hit the gravel hard as I ran toward the barn, where the commotion had come from. My son, Ethan, was already screaming, high-pitched, raw, and gut-wrenching. No, Zeus. The ranch dogs barked like mad. Chickens flapped into the air. I burst past the open gate and froze at the sight before me. Zeus, Ethan's loyal, highly trained German shepherd, was on the ground. Blood smeared across his side, his breathing shallow. Ethan, only 13, was kneeling by him, shaking, crying, holding on to Zeus like his soul depended on it. 3 strangers, men I had never seen before, stood with rifles, looking smug and totally unbothered. And standing beside them was Karen, HOA Karen, hair in her usual tight bun, arms folded, sunglasses hiding her eyes, and lips curled like she was biting back a smirk. She looked right at me and said, "You people take these dogs too seriously." My mouth went dry. My knees shook. What did you do?" I yelled, my voice cracking between fury and disbelief. Karen shrugged. "Your dog attacked a guest. He should have been put down long ago." "What guest?" I screamed. "Who are these men?" Ethan looked up at me, face red and wet, and cried out, "Mom, he's not moving." Then Zeus let out a horrible, shallow whine, one last sound, and went completely still. I'll never forget the sound Ethan made next. It wasn't human, but before I could react, one of the men cocked his rifle again and said, "Don't even think about calling the cops. This is our land now." Wait, what? How did they get in? How did Karen let this happen? And what exactly did she mean by guests? That was the moment I knew. Something very, very wrong was going on in our gated ranch community. Something deeper than just another HOA dispute. Let me take you back to the beginning. 3 months earlier, we had moved into Willow Bend Ranch Estates, a private, gated HOA community designed for ranch lovers. Every house sat on at least 10 acres, with horse barns, chicken coops, and pasture land. My husband and I had saved for years to get this place for Ethan. He had autism, and being around animals, especially Zeus, kept him calm, focused, and happy. Zeus was no ordinary pet. He was trained for support, obedience, security, and above all, he was Ethan's protector. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Zeus. Everyone except Karen, the newly elected HOA president who moved in from a fancy Houston suburb and made it her life's mission to civilize the ranch. From the day she arrived, she had problems with everything. "My daughter is scared of your dog. Your barn light is too bright. Your chickens are loud." Ethan's drawings on the front porch looked messy. She hated everything that made our home ours, but we ignored her. As long as we followed the HOA rules and paid our dues, we had every right to live peacefully. Then one day we got a letter. Violation notice. Unauthorized structure on property. Your barn extension violates HOA guidelines and must be removed within 30 days. I was confused. We had built a small lean-to shelter near the barn to shield the goats from the wind. It wasn't permanent. But Karen decided it was against the aesthetic plan. I showed her our approved building permit. She smirked. "Permits don't matter here. I decide what's allowed now." That's when I realized Karen was not just annoying, she was dangerous. But we still didn't think she'd go this far. A few days later, I caught 2 men on our property, walking near the back fence line with cameras. I yelled from the porch, "Hey, this is private land. You're trespassing." They didn't even flinch. They waved at me, then walked off. When I told Karen, she said, "They're prospective buyers. I'm helping the HOA bring in fresh blood, people who appreciate modern ranching." That didn't sit right. I asked around. None of the other neighbors knew anything about land being sold or new members moving in. I called the HOA office, an outsourced firm in Dallas, and they said no official land division was underway. But Karen insisted she was organizing a new development phase. Then the gates to the community started acting funny. Usually, you needed a code or remote clicker to get in. But for 2 weeks straight, the gate stayed open during random hours. When I complained, Karen said, "It's to encourage visits from potential investors. Don't be so paranoid." One night, while coming back from the grocery store, I spotted a pickup truck parked just outside our property line. I approached with my phone recording. "Can I help you?" I asked. The driver, a heavy-set man in camouflage, said, "Just admiring the land. We'll be neighbors soon." I asked who told him that. Karen, he grinned. She says she's parceling it up. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. My husband said I was overthinking it. She's all bark, no bite, he said. Let the board handle it. But I knew something was off. Then Zeus started barking at night. Wildly. Growling. Pacing the fence line. We checked the cameras. Motion detectors kept triggering around 2 a.m., but no one ever showed up clearly on screen. Then came the mail tampering. Packages for Ethan's homeschool supplies went missing. The feed bags we ordered arrived half torn open, and someone left meat, raw meat, tossed over the back fence. We knew it was meant for Zeus. Poison, probably. I reported all this to the HOA management firm. They promised to investigate, but I got nothing but silence after that, until that awful morning, where Karen stood beside armed trespassers on our land, and my son's best friend lay bleeding in his arms. And the man with the rifle had just told me something that shook me to my bones. This is our land now. I stared at Karen, who didn't even flinch. Then I asked the only thing I could think of. What the hell have you done, Karen? But before she could answer, the second man raised a piece of paper and shoved it at me. We bought it. Here's the deed. And my blood ran cold. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I stared at the crumpled paper in the man's hand, my fingers twitching to grab it, to read it, to scream that it was fake. But I couldn't move. Ethan was still on his knees, cradling Zeus's body, his face buried in the dog's fur. And Karen was just standing there like she'd accomplished something. I said, the man snapped, waving the paper in my face again. We own this now. I snatched the document from his hand. It looked official, too official, stamped, notarized. It claimed a 2.5-acre parcel within our land had been sold last week to a private security firm, Midwest Rural Safety, LLC. The address matched part of the back pasture we rarely used. How could this happen? This is fraud. I shouted. This land is part of our deed, our property. This isn't even legal. Karen stepped forward now, a sickeningly calm smile on her lips. It's very legal, she said. You didn't read the fine print in your HOA agreement. The board, meaning me, has the authority to designate unused or underutilized common areas for development. That pasture technically falls under shared community resource, not private property. You just use it. Now they own it. Ethan looked up confused. Mom, are they taking a ranch? No, I said firmly, pulling him to his feet and shielding him with my arm. No one is taking anything. But inside, my confidence was crumbling. Karen had outmaneuvered us, somehow, and now strangers were claiming ownership of part of our land, and they just shot our dog. I looked at the three men, now casually walking back toward the fence line like nothing had happened. One of them patted the other's shoulder and laughed. Keep moving. I shouted, You're trespassing. You want to be careful throwing that word around. One of them yelled back, Next time, it won't be the dog. Ethan flinched, and I felt something deep inside me crack. No, this wasn't going to end like this. I called the sheriff. An hour later, Sheriff Parker pulled up in his dusty SUV. He was a wide, tired-looking man with silver hair and a slow walk, but sharp eyes. He'd been sheriff in our county for 23 years. I'd seen him break up fights at the rodeo, wrangle stray cattle, and gently guide lost hikers out of the woods. But this time, he looked like he was walking into a landmine. Karen, he nodded stiffly at her. Didn't expect to see you again so soon. She smiled sweetly. Just doing my civic duty. I handed him the supposed deed. He studied it for a long while, then turned to the fence, where the three armed men were still lingering, leaning on their truck. You boys won't explain why you shot a dog on someone else's property. He charged us, one said. Self-defense. Dog wasn't leashed. It was inside a fence pasture. I snapped. They weren't even supposed to be here. Karen cut in. Sheriff, let's not escalate. There's a civil matter here, but the security team was authorized to inspect their new property lines. If the dog attacked, well, that's unfortunate, but it's not a criminal matter. Parker looked at me. You said your dog was trained? Certified support dog for my son, I said, voice shaking. He was protecting the property. He never bites. He barks, but he's trained not to engage unless we're in danger. Parker nodded slowly, then looked at Ethan. The boy still hadn't let go of Zeus. I'll file a report, he said. But this deed, I gotta be honest. If the HOA signed off and it passed through the registrar's office, it'll hold unless you can challenge in court. So, they just get away with it? I asked, my voice rising. They kill our dog and walk off with our land? He rubbed the back of his neck. File a wrongful death for the dog. Call a property lawyer. That's the only way. And what about them being armed? Threatening us? He looked back at the truck. Unfortunately, we're an open carry state. And unless they were aiming at you directly, it's not enough. Karen stepped closer. Sheriff, perhaps you should advise them not to make this harder on themselves. They signed a contract when they moved in. He turned to her slowly. Karen, he said, his voice tight, you've stirred enough trouble in this county. You might have fooled the HOA board, but not everyone buys your act. I'll be keeping an eye on this. She flinched, but only slightly. He turned to me and added quietly, you get that lawyer, fast. That night, Ethan wouldn't eat. He sat at the corner of the porch, eyes locked on the barnyard, where we'd buried Zeus under the big oak tree. I wrapped a blanket around him, sat beside him, and just listened to the wind. He didn't bark this time. Ethan whispered. He knew he was going to die. I swallowed hard. Zeus did what he was trained to do. He protected you. He didn't die for nothing. But why would people do that? He asked. Why would grown-ups lie and kill and act like it's no big deal? I didn't have an answer, but I promised him one thing. We're going to fight back. We called a lawyer the next day. A property specialist from San Antonio, Mr. Bradlane. Sharp guy. Clean suit. Thin glasses. But the moment I showed him the HOA contract, he sighed. This clause here, he said, tapping the fine print, is the problem. It grants the board authority to repurpose underdeveloped or shared lands within certain parameters. But it's our land. Not on paper. The boundaries are muddy. Most ranchers don't challenge these things. It'll take time to dig through records and build a case. We don't have time, I said. They're already patrolling. Armed. My son's not safe. He nodded. Then we get creative. What does that mean? He smiled thinly. HOAs have rules. But the law has bigger ones. If we can't win this through ownership, we'll expose misconduct, fraud, collusion. We find one illegal step in that land transfer and it all crumbles. That night, I made copies of every HOA notice Karen had sent us. The suspicious ones, the violations, the letters missing official signatures, and the one we almost threw away weeks ago. Notice of proposed land development. If no formal objections are filed within 10 days, this request shall be considered approved by default. It had been slipped into our mailbox, not mailed, and we never saw it. She planted it, hoped we wouldn't respond. And she was right. Until now, 3 days later, I returned from town to find tire tracks cutting through our front pasture. The gates had been opened again. I sprinted to the barn. The chicken coop was torn open. The goats were scattered. And spray painted across our barn wall, in big red letters, were the words, out by spring or else. And that's when I heard Ethan screaming again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Mom. And Mom. Ethan's voice was coming from behind the barn. I sprinted to the torn-up yard, my heart banging like a drum. Dust kicked up from my boots as I rounded the corner and froze. Ethan was standing near the edge of the fence, pointing. Beside him was a young woman, no older than 20, trembling barefoot, with blood on her arm and a bruised cheek. Her clothes were torn, and her eyes darted everywhere like she was expecting someone to jump out. I found her near the creek. Ethan cried, gripping my hand. She was hiding. She said she ran away. I rushed to the girl, trying not to startle her. Hey, sweetie, it's okay. You're safe here. I'm Amanda. What's your name? She hesitated, whispering. Tina, are you hurt? She nodded slowly. They hit me. I was trying to leave. They said I saw too much. I just want to go home. My stomach dropped. Who did this to you? Her lip trembled. The men stay on the back lot. They said I had to stay quiet or they'd bury me with the next dog. Ethan gasped. I felt cold from the inside out. You stay here, I said firmly, trying to sound calmer than I felt. I'm calling the sheriff. But Tina grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. No cops? Please. They said if I talk, I'd disappear. I looked down at her bruised face and saw it then pure terror. Whoever she had escaped from, they weren't just trespassers. They were dangerous. Maybe more than we knew. But if she was telling the truth, then Karen hadn't just let armed men onto our property. She'd given access to criminals. I made Tina a bed in the guest room, gave her water, cleaned the cut on her arm. While she rested, I called Sheriff Parker, this time on his personal line. "You found what behind your barn?" he asked, voice laced with tension. "A young woman named Tina. She says the men Karen brought and assaulted her, threatened her." "I believe her, Sheriff, and she's terrified." He didn't hesitate. "I'm coming. Tell her to stay put and keep her safe." Ethan stayed close to Tina while I waited at the front gate for Sheriff. He arrived with 2 deputies and a medic. When they brought Tina out, her hands were shaking, but she nodded at the sheriff. They keep girls out there. Some are scared. Some aren't even adults. I heard them talk about moving to another ranch in a few weeks. Parker turned pale. "That sounds like trafficking." "I don't know," Tina whispered, "but they never let us talk to outsiders. And when they saw the dog near the fence a few days ago, they said they had to take care of it. That's when it hit me. Zeus wasn't just shot for barking. They targeted him because he knew something was wrong. Karen, she had enabled this." The sheriff left with Tina, promising to launch a formal investigation, but warned us, "These people are dangerous. Keep your doors locked. And if Karen or those men step foot on your side of the fence again, call me first." But 2 nights later, while I was brushing my teeth, the porch motion sensor light flashed, then went out. I peeked through the window and saw someone moving by the barn again. I ran out with a flashlight and a bat, but they were already gone. They left behind a single item nailed to the barn door, a photo of Ethan, taken through a long-range lens while he was feeding the chickens, and scribbled across the bottom in thick black marker, "He's next." The next morning, I called a lawyer and demanded we file an emergency injunction. Brad was already 1 step ahead. "I went digging through Karen's records," he said. "Turns out the security firm Midwest Rural Safety doesn't exist. It's a shell, registered 2 months ago to a P.O. box in El Paso. No known owners. No tax ID." I blinked. "So it's fake?" "Worse. It's a front. My guess? These guys use HOAs in rural areas to plan operations where people won't ask questions. Karen's either in on it or she's being paid to look the other way." That made my blood boil. "They killed our dog. They threatened my son. They assaulted a girl." Brad nodded. "Then we hit back. You and every neighbor who's had enough of Karen's dictatorship need to call an emergency HOA vote. Force her to step down. Elect a temporary president. That gives us legal grounds to void her approvals. I'll help you write the motion." But she controls the board. Not if enough homeowners sign the vote. Get them on your side. I spent the next 48 hours walking the dusty roads of our gated ranch community. I knocked on every door, explained what happened. Some neighbors were shocked. Others weren't. "She's been sniffing around our back pasture, too," one man muttered. "Tried to convince us to sell to her contacts. She sent us a violation for having wind chimes," an elderly woman said. "And now strange trucks drive by at night." Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Karen was using her position to slowly squeeze out the old community, to build something new, something dangerous. We got 14 signatures, enough to trigger a vote. That same evening, we sent an official letter to the HOA legal department, citing fraud, misconduct, and endangerment of minors. It gave us temporary grounds to freeze any new land transfers until the vote concluded. Karen wasn't happy. At midnight, someone threw a rock through our living room window. Attached to it, another photo of Ethan. This time, he wasn't alone. Karen was in the background, smiling. We called the sheriff again. He posted an unmarked cruiser outside our home for protection. But that didn't stop the intimidation. Strange cars circled. Dogs barked all night. Ethan barely slept. Until the morning, he woke up screaming, because the grave where Zeus was buried had been dug up, not by an animal, by human hands. We ran outside. The grave was empty, and in its place was a single word carved into a wooden plank. "Move." The word move stared back at me like a curse. Ethan clung to my side, sobbing, staring at the empty patch of soil where Zeus had once rested. The earth was scattered, disturbed deliberately, not like a wild animal would do it. This was personal. This was war. I bent down, my hands shaking as I tried to cover the hole, but I couldn't. My heart felt like it had been ripped open a second time. They'd already taken Zeus from Ethan once, and now they had desecrated his grave. That was the last straw. I called Sheriff Parker again, this time with fire in my voice. "They dug up my son's dog, Sheriff. They didn't just kill him. They exhumed his grave and left a message. Parker cursed softly under his breath. They're escalating. That means they're scared. We've been surveilling Karen, quietly, since the girl came forward. Turns out, she's had dealings with multiple unknown parties. Cash payments, burner phones, unauthorized gate overrides. So you can arrest her now? I asked. Not yet. We need hard proof. She knew what she was doing. But trust me, we're close. Close wasn't good enough, because they had just crossed a sacred line. That night, I sat with Ethan on the porch. The cool Texas wind blew softly through the trees. He was quiet, staring into the dark fields. I miss him, he whispered. I know, baby, I said, brushing his hair. But we're going to make this right. For Zeus. For our family. They can scare us, but they can't break us. He nodded. Can we get him back? I paused. We'll do everything we can. Then he added, Zeus didn't run. He stayed, even when they had guns. That hit me hard. He was right. Zeus had faced down danger because he believed in this family, this home, and if he could do that, we couldn't run either. The next morning, the neighborhood vote began. I stood in front of the community barn, where 27 homeowners had gathered. Brad, our lawyer, stood beside me and explained the stakes. Karen has abused her role, authorized fraudulent land sales, brought in armed outsiders, ignored your safety. You all deserve better. This vote is your voice. Make it count. The votes were cast in silence. 25 voted to remove her. 2 abstained. Karen didn't show up. That night, we received official word from the HOA legal board. Karen's authority was suspended pending investigation, and all land transfers were frozen. A temporary HOA president was appointed. Mr. Hal Morgan, a quiet, respected rancher who had lived in the community for 15 years. It felt like we were finally winning. But winning comes at a cost. The very next morning, just before sunrise, our electric fence line was slashed. Then the barn caught fire. We woke to the acrid stench of smoke and the panicked cries of our goats. Flames licked the roof of the barn, like a hungry beast. I grabbed the water hoses while my husband sprinted for the fire extinguisher. We called 911, and by the grace of God, the fire department arrived in time to contain the damage. But it was no accident. Someone had poured gasoline through the barn side, the same side that faced the purchase lot. The sheriff came again. This time his tone was grim. They're getting desperate. The fire confirms arson, and we found boot prints leading back toward the wooded creek behind the lots. Whoever did this came on foot, probably from the illegal site. What about Tina? I asked. Is she safe? She's in protective custody now, and she told us something new. He pulled out a photo. It was Karen, standing next to one of the armed men, the same man who handed me the fake deed. They were at a barbecue, smiling, holding drinks. Name's Rick Dalton, the sheriff said. Ex-military, dishonorably discharged, known to operate under multiple aliases, has history of threats, illegal security contracts, and suspected involvement in a trafficking ring out of Oklahoma. Karen knew. She had to, he confirmed. We're moving in within the week. I was stunned. Why not now? We need to catch them red-handed. If we go too early, they'll disappear. But we're installing surveillance on their lot tonight. He looked at me, serious. Until then, don't be a hero. Lock your doors. Keep lights on. They won't go quietly. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the fire in my head. What if we hadn't woken up in time? What if Ethan had been in the barn? I sat in the kitchen, lights dim, sipping cold tea, when I heard a noise. A click. A soft, deliberate sound, like a door latch. I froze. It wasn't the front door. It was the mudroom. I stood, barefoot, holding my breath, listening. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Someone inside the house. I grabbed the bat by the fridge and crept toward the hallway. Every light in the hallway had gone out. Cut at the breaker. Then I heard Ethan's door open, and a voice, low, male, whispering, "Get the boy." My heart stopped. I screamed, "Ethan!" and charged. I didn't think. I just ran. My bare feet pounded against the cold wooden floor. The hallway was dark. Shadows stretched across the walls like something out of a nightmare. I could barely see, but I could hear. The whisper had turned into rustling. Footsteps. Ethan's bedroom door creaking open. A sharp breath. "Ethan!" I screamed again, raising the bat over my shoulder like a sword. The next sound I heard was Ethan's voice, trembling but loud. "Leave me alone." Then a heavy thud. I reached his door and slammed it open. There, in the faint light from his bedside lamp, stood a man broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, mask over his face, one hand outstretched toward Ethan, the other clenching something shiny, a taser. Without a second thought, I swung the bat. It connected with his arm. Crack! He howled, dropping the taser. Ethan dove off the bed, scrambled behind me. The man stumbled, turned to run, and there, at the end of the hallway, was my husband, rifle in hand. "Don't move," he growled. The intruder froze. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would burst. But then, another noise. A second man, this one crashing through the kitchen door. Glass shattered. They had planned this. I grabbed Ethan and shoved him into the bathroom. Locked the door. Do not open it for anyone. Then I turned back and saw my husband and the second man locked in a brutal struggle. The intruder had a knife. My husband fought him hand to hand, trying to disarm him. I rushed to help, but the first man, the one I hit, slammed into me, knocking me into the wall. Everything spun. My vision blurred. Then sirens, blinding red and blue lights, lit up the windows. The sheriff, they'd come just in time. The two men scrambled for the back door, but deputies burst in, guns raised, yelling commands. One man dropped. The other tried to run, but a deputy tackled him to the ground. I crawled toward the bathroom. "Ethan," I gasped, banging on the door. "It's me." "Open up." The lock clicked. The door opened. He threw his arms around me, crying into my shoulder. "They tried to take me, Mom." "I know, baby. I know." The next morning was chaos. The intruders were identified. One of them? Rick Dalton, the man with the fake deed. The same one from the photo with Karen. The other? A man named Jace. No ID, no employment record. Just a string of warrants in 3 different states. They had come to take Ethan for leverage, to scare us into leaving. But they hadn't counted on us fighting back. Sheriff Parker was furious. They crossed a legal line tonight. Karen is finished. He showed me a USB drive. Found this in Rick's truck. Emails. Voice notes. Karen was coordinating the whole thing. Told him exactly when to come. Even gave him the gate override code. I felt sick. She said it was time to deal with the loud ones before the vote went public. Parker added, voice like stone. "You were her loud one." I looked over at Ethan, sitting quietly on the porch swing, holding a photo of Zeus. "She messed with the wrong mom," I said. Karen was arrested that same afternoon. No warning, no HOA meeting, no hiding behind neighborhood rules. They dragged her out of her pristine white ranch house in handcuffs, designer sunglasses still perched on her nose, mouth wide in protest. "You can't do this. I own this community." "You own nothing," Parker told her, "except lies." Neighbors watched from behind fences, some cheering, some stunned. But no one stopped it. No one stood up for her. The truth was out. Karen had accepted bribes from criminal organizations to help them gain foothold access into safe, rural communities by abusing vague HOA rules and quiet property deals. She had helped them create shell companies, forged documents, and threatened or silenced anyone who asked too many questions. And the worst part? She wasn't the only one doing it. Other HOAs across the state were under investigation now. We had started something much bigger than ourselves. But for now, we had won our battle. Weeks passed. Ethan went back to feeding the chickens, talking to goats, smiling a little more each day. He made a new drawing of Zeus, this time with wings, and taped it to the fridge. Our barn was rebuilt. Security was tighter. The new HOA board implemented background checks for anyone attempting to buy land or offer services in the neighborhood. And one morning, I found something by the gate. A box. Inside, Zeus's collar. No note, no explanation. But I knew what it meant. Even in death, they couldn't break what he stood for. Then one day, as I was walking the fence line, I heard a noise from the woods. Movement. I paused, hand on my hip, gripping my phone. "Who's there?" I called out. A figure emerged slowly, scruffy, hunched, face tired but familiar. It was Tina. I ran again, she said, breathless. "They're still out there. Just not here anymore. But they're building something else. Somewhere else." She handed me a piece of paper. "Coordinates. I thought you'd want to know." My heart sank. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I held the piece of paper in my hand, my thumb smudging the edge of the torn notebook scrap, as I stared at the numbers Tina gave me. GPS coordinates scribbled in frantic ink. They pointed somewhere deep into a rural patch 2 counties over. Are you sure this is where they went? I asked. Tina nodded, looking over her shoulder like someone might be watching. They moved fast after Karen got arrested, packed up one night, and left. I followed the truck on foot, hid in the back of a supply van for 2 hours. They talked about setting up a clean slate in a place where no one asked questions. I swallowed, my gut twisted. These men, these people, they weren't just scammers. They were organized, mobile, and still dangerous. And we'd only stopped one branch. Tina wiped her face and looked me in the eye. I thought you'd do something about it, like you did here. I'm not the police, I said quietly. But you got Zeus justice, she replied. That's more than anyone else did. I looked past her, toward the barn Ethan and I had painted with fresh white paint, toward the tree where Zeus had been reburied, this time with a real stone marker and solar lights. I nodded. We'll do something. That night, I showed the coordinates to Sheriff Parker. He sighed, rubbed his face, and said, that location falls out of our jurisdiction. It's a logging county, mostly unpatrolled. But I'll make some calls. Get some boots on the ground. Don't wait too long, I said. These people don't leave loose ends. Then I handed him the flash drive Ethan had found under his bed earlier that day, tucked behind a floorboard, wrapped in a sock. It contained something chilling, video footage. One of the men, Jace, the second intruder, had been recording during the home invasion. The date stamp showed it clearly. And worse, the video showed him speaking to someone on a call before they entered. The audio was fuzzy, but we could make out one sentence. We take the kid, she folds. Either way, we own it by the end of the week. That video was the final nail in the coffin for the investigation. It was time to take this beyond just our ranch. News broke 3 days later. Local HOA president arrested in alleged rural land trafficking scheme. The article went viral. Karen's mugshot was plastered all over social media. Every major station in Texas ran the story. Reporters came knocking. Protesters appeared outside the remaining security compound at the edge of our ranch. People from other counties reached out, sharing eerily similar stories. Disappearances, mysterious land buys, weird HOA behavior. Something much bigger was unraveling. And we were smack in the center. The governor's office even made a statement. We are launching a statewide audit of private HOA boards, particularly in rural communities. Abuse of power, especially involving vulnerable populations, will not be tolerated. But even with the momentum building, it didn't bring back Zeus. It didn't erase the nights Ethan still woke up screaming, clutching his pillow like a shield. And it didn't erase the fear I felt when a car I didn't recognize slowed near our gate. Because no matter how many headlines or arrests, I knew this wasn't over. One evening, as I cleaned up the kitchen, Ethan came in holding his drawing pad. I made something, he said. He flipped it around. It was a picture of Zeus again, standing tall between two barns. This time, there was a child holding his leash and a shadowy figure behind them, fading into the distance. I felt tears prick my eyes. That's beautiful. He's still protecting us, Ethan whispered. And I believe him, but peace didn't last. 2 nights later, while I was out feeding the goats, a truck pulled up just past the tree line. Black, no plates. The windows were tinted. I slowly backed toward the barn, hands slipping into my back pocket for my phone. Then the passenger door opened, and a small, handwritten sign was tossed out onto the grass before the truck sped off. I waited until it was gone, then picked it up. It read, "You may have won one battle, but you're not the only ranch. Keep looking over your shoulder, Ranch Mom." And at the bottom, taped with glue, was a single black dog collar. It wasn't Zeus's. It was another dog, another warning, another target. I gave the collar to Sheriff Parker the next morning. His jaw clenched. "They're taunting you now. They're sending a message," I said. "They don't just want to take land anymore. They want to silence people who speak up." He nodded. "We've opened a federal task force. Your story put us on the map. But these guys are connected. We're going to need help." "You've got it," I said. "From me, from every neighbor here, and from every family that's ever been bullied by these HOA monsters. We weren't just protecting our land anymore. We were protecting every ranch, every small town, every child who ever had a best friend like Zeus." But just when we thought things were stabilizing, one of the original HOA board members, Mrs. Bradley, a retired schoolteacher, was found unconscious in her home. No signs of forced entry. But her vote in the Karen removal meeting had been public, vocal, loud. On her fridge, a note written in the same black marker as before. Silence is safer. You've been warned. We realized then, Karen may have been arrested, but someone was still working behind the scenes. Someone who hadn't gone down with her, and they were coming back. The sound of the monitor in Mrs. Bradley's hospital room was soft and steady, a faint rhythm in the background as I stood beside her bed. Her face was pale, her arm hooked to an forward drip, and her glasses had cracked on the side table like a forgotten relic. Sheriff Parker stood across from me, jaw tight, eyes dark. She's stable, he said quietly, but the doctors think it was a mix of sedatives and pressure trauma to the back of her head. Not a fall, not an accident. So someone drugged her and hit her? He nodded, most likely while she slept. Quiet entry, no broken locks, no glass. Whoever did this knew the house. Probably even knew her routine. I looked at her wrinkled hands resting on the blanket. She was just a schoolteacher. All she did was stand up for what's right. And they tried to make her the next warning. I clenched my fists. They're still here. Someone's still helping them. Even after Karen got locked up. He lowered his voice. We've identified 3 other names from Karen's past emails. One is an HOA treasurer, Dan Holloway. He disappeared 2 days ago. Left a note saying he was taking time off to visit family, but there's no record of him leaving town. Let me guess. I muttered, burner phone. No forwarding address. Exactly. And the other 2? They're still in the community. My head snapped toward him. What? We're watching them, he said quickly. We can't afford to spook them yet, but we believe at least one of them has been leaking information about residents who resist compliance. So that rock through my window, that photo of Ethan, that came from one of my neighbors. Most likely, he said, and if they know the sheriff's department is watching, they'll vanish. I didn't like it, waiting for snakes to strike, but I trusted Parker. So I nodded. I want to know when you move on them. You'll be the first call. Back at home, Ethan was building a small wooden box under the tree where Zeus was buried. His own project. He called it a memory locker. He wanted to put notes, drawings, photos, even Zeus's toys inside. Said it was like giving Zeus a scrapbook in heaven. It was the first time he'd been truly focused on something since the shooting. I sat on the porch, watching him work, and felt a strange peace. But it didn't last. That evening, as we ate dinner, the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting anyone. I glanced at my husband. We both stood at the same time. He grabbed the bat we now kept in the umbrella stand. I peeked through the peephole. No one. I opened the door slowly. At my feet was a cardboard package, taped shut, no name, no label, just a word. Exhibit A. We brought it inside and carefully opened it with gloves. I wasn't taking chances. Inside was a single item, a flash drive, and a note. You think you exposed everything? Think again. What you're dealing with goes beyond HOA rules. Welcome to level 2. B. I frowned. B. My husband raised an eyebrow. Bradley? No, she's in a coma. This isn't her handwriting. And besides, she wouldn't leave something like this on our porch. I popped the flash drive into an old laptop, one we no longer use for personal files, in case it was rigged. A folder popped up, labeled Red Ditch. Inside were 6 video clips. The first was a drone recording, grainy but clear. It showed a gated property, larger than ours. Fewer homes, more open land. A single road leading in. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. The second video, 3 men unloading crates from a truck. One crate was labeled Field Comms. Another said Suppression Tools. The third clip made my blood freeze. It showed a fence enclosure with dogs, at least 6, some barking, some pacing, one laying very still. And then I saw the man standing outside the fence. Rick Dalton. He was supposed to be in jail. I paused the video, zoomed in. It was him. My husband stared at the screen. How is that possible? He was arrested. Sheriff Parker called me back an hour later after I sent the files to him. He sounded shaken. That location matches a disputed property about 90 miles east, borderline tribal land in unincorporated county. Very little oversight. And Dalton, he sighed, transferred to county jail in El Paso. The van crashed on the way. The driver was found unconscious. No sign of Rick. We weren't told. The agency in charge kept it quiet. I was stunned. So he escaped? They think it was an inside job. And he's building another operation. He confirmed it. Yes. And now you've got a target painted on your back. We reinforced the property again. Motion lights. Extra fencing. Neighbors started banding together. Some forming patrol groups. Others offering to watch the road. For once, it felt like we weren't alone. But the fear remained. Late one night, I found Ethan sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. Do you think they'll come again? He asked. I sat beside him. I don't know, but we'll be ready if they do. He nodded. Then he said something that stopped my heart. I heard someone whisper my name last night, outside my window. I turned to him sharply. Why didn't you wake us? I thought it was just a dream until I saw the footprint in the flower bed. I stood and ran around to his window. There it was, a single boot print in the soil. Fresh. Someone had been standing there, watching him sleep. The next morning, the new HOA president, Hal Morgan, called an emergency meeting. He had news. We received a formal complaint from the private contractor Karen hired to survey the land before her arrest, he said, standing in front of Community Barn. They're claiming breach of contract due to disruption of operations. What operations? Someone asked. Hal took a deep breath. The company was never licensed in Texas. It's tied to 3 shell corporations, all dissolved in the last 90 days. But the problem is, there's a clause in the old HOA contract that gives Karen's approvals temporary wait for 120 days unless formally revoked by court order. So they still have rights? Technically, yes, on paper, but not legally. People murmured. He added, we're filing for an injunction, but until the court hears it, those operatives might try to re-enter the land, claiming access. That means they'll come back. I said aloud, and this time, they won't just bring papers. Hal nodded gravely. We need to prepare. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It simply read, they'll be there at dawn. Clear your property if you want to survive. I showed it to Parker. He didn't flinch. We're ready. And they were. The sheriff's department, the new HOA board, even a few off-duty veterans from the neighborhood set up a silent perimeter overnight. Dawn came with fog. Thick, ghostly fog rolling in across the pasture. And right at 6:13 a.m., the sound of engines. 2 black trucks. 5 men. All dressed in black. They didn't come fast. They didn't shout. They simply pulled up to the edge of the land, got out, and walked toward the barn, bold as ever, until they heard the click of a dozen rifles. Sheriff Parker stepped out of the shadows. Morning, boys, he said calmly. Care to explain what you're doing here? One of the men smirked. Just checking property lines. You're trespassing, Parker said, and you're under arrest. They reached for their belts, but before they could act, every deputy stepped forward. One man ran. Didn't get far. All 5 were detained. But something was off. They had no ID, no phones, no licenses, just a laminated badge each, reading, Property Access, Red Ditch Network. Parker held one up to the light. We've never heard of this organization. But I had. I remembered the name from the flash drive folder. Red Ditch. I said aloud, that's the next phase. This isn't just about land. It's a network. Parker looked at me, grim. Then we're dealing with something much larger than a rogue HOA. This might be organized domestic infiltration. I nodded slowly, and they just sent a message. Again. What message? He asked. I looked over at the barn. The door had been spray painted, bright red. You won't make it to court. I stared at the message painted across our barn in blood red spray paint. You won't make it to court. The threat wasn't just directed at me anymore. It was for the entire community. The sheriff's men had detained the 5 trespassers, but none of them spoke a word during questioning, not even a fake name. They refused food, refused water, and sat in their holding cells with the eerie discipline of trained soldiers. Ethan saw the words on the barn before we could cover them. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just said, they're trying to scare you, Mom. I bent down and cupped his face. Not just me, baby. All of us. He nodded. Then let's make them scared instead. I didn't know whether to be proud or heartbroken, but I knew one thing. My 13-year-old son had been forced to grow up too fast. The sheriff's department removed the paint, but I had the boards replaced anyway. Something about those words being scrubbed away felt like trying to erase a wound instead of healing it. 2 days later, we received word from the courthouse. Our injunction hearing had been approved. We were officially taking the HOA corruption case to federal court, but there was a problem. The courthouse was 3 counties over, and after the arrest of 5 men, Parker informed me that there was chatter of an ambush. We got wind that someone's planning to intercept the trip, might try to delay your testimony, possibly detain Brad too. Brad Lane? I asked our lawyer. He nodded grimly. They've been watching him. We found a tracker under his car. I took a deep breath. We couldn't delay the hearing. If we missed our testimony, the injunction would be dropped. The land claim Karen approved would go back into pending status, meaning her network could swoop in with a new clean buyer and claim it all over again. I clenched my fists. Then we don't go quietly. We go smart. Brad, to his credit, was already 10 steps ahead. We're going to split up, he said. I'll take a decoy car with the physical documents. You and your husband go separately. The real testimony is digital, backed up on a cloud server. They can't stop the data. Won't they be watching the roads? He nodded. That's why I'm bringing in help. Old military buddies. They've seen this kind of game before. Is this really that serious? I asked. Brad looked me dead in the eyes. They're not just trying to scare you. They're trying to establish a precedent. If they win this case, it'll give every HOA with a loophole of confidence to push people off their land. What happened to you could happen to hundreds of families across the state. They know that. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was a war over who had the right to call land their home. And if we didn't stop it here now, in Willow Bend Ranch Estates, it would spread like wildfire. That night, I gathered the neighbors. We met under the community barn roof, now reinforced with floodlights and security cams. Everyone came armed, shotguns, pistols, batons. Even old Mr. Donnelly, who walked a cane, had a revolver holstered at his hip. Listen up, I said, stepping into the center of the circle. Court is happening in 4 days. We need to get there safely. But we also need to protect the ranch while we're gone. That means setting up shifts, cameras, roadblocks if needed. What if they come during the hearing? Someone asked. Then we'll make sure someone's here to meet them, Hal Morgan replied. I'll stay, said a teenage boy named Levi, eyes burning. They took my uncle's land in Kansas last year, said it was for development, just bulldozed it after he refused to sign. One by one, hands went up. Retired cops, ex-farmers, stay-at-home moms, even a young woman who just moved in 3 weeks ago. They were ready to fight, not with violence, but with unity. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we were no longer just defending ourselves. We were building something stronger, a wall of people who refused to be scared. The next morning, my husband and I packed 2 bags each and loaded up a quiet, older sedan, borrowed from our neighbor to avoid being tracked. Brad left earlier in a decoy SUV, heading north with a dummy hard drive. We were to take the scenic route through the hills. No tolls, no cameras, no GPS. We didn't tell Ethan we were leaving until the last minute. He hugged me tight. Don't let them win, Mom. I won't. He looked me dead in the eye. Promise? I promise. Halfway through the drive, as we passed an old orchard near a rest stop, a pickup truck pulled out a side road. It matched our speed, then switched lanes, then slowed, then sped up again. My husband tapped the wheel nervously. He's pacing us. I looked back. The driver wore sunglasses, bald head, dark hoodie. He's one of them. I reached for my phone. No signal. Of course. The pickup sped up and jerked slightly to the right, nudging our back bumper. Hang on, my husband yelled. He veered left onto a dirt road, hoping to lose him on the gravel. Dust exploded behind us. The truck followed, horn blaring. I opened the glove box, pulled out the flare gun Brad had insisted we carry. The truck closed in 10 feet behind. Then 5. I leaned out the window and fired. The flare smashed against the truck's windshield, bursting into orange flame. The driver swerved, clipped a ditch, and rolled sideways into the orchard. We didn't stop. We drove until we hit a small gas station with a working landline. I called Parker. He confirmed what I already feared. Not just you. Brad's decoy car was chased too. They're working overtime. We made it to the courthouse with minutes to spare. We sat in front of the federal judge, an older black woman with a no-nonsense stare, and laid out everything. The fake land transfers, the falsified property lines, the attack on our home, the trespassers, the arson, the attempt to kidnap Ethan, the surveillance, the threats, The Red Ditch Network. We showed the video files. The collar. The spray-painted threats. Brad laid it out like a surgeon. Precise, professional, and devastating. The judge didn't blink once. After 3 hours, she finally spoke. "This is not just a case of misconduct," she said. "This is organized racketeering, fraud, and abuse of power under the color of authority." She banged her gavel. "Injunction granted. All land transactions authorized by Karen Miller and associated shell entities are hereby suspended, pending federal criminal investigation." Cheers erupted in the courtroom. I wept, not for the victory, but because I had kept my promise. We had made it to court, and we had not let them win. But victory always comes with a price. When we returned to Willow Bend, Ethan wasn't waiting on the porch. Neither was my husband's brother, who had agreed to stay with him. My stomach turned to ice. I ran inside. Ethan's room was empty. So was the kitchen. Then I found the note. "You're brave, but not smart. He'll be returned when you give us what we want. You exposed our network. Now you'll help rebuild it." Rick, he had Ethan. I stared at the note with the kind of numbness that comes when your brain refuses to accept reality. My hands trembled so hard the paper shook like a leaf in a storm. The world around me faded. No bar, no trees, no floor beneath my feet. Just that message. "He'll be returned when you give us what we want." My son, my only child, was gone. The house felt wrong. Too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath with me. My husband paced back and forth, rubbing his forehead with both hands, muttering curses under his breath. His brother stood by the window, guilt written all over his face. "I just went to make a sandwich," he whispered. I was gone for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I didn't blame him. I didn't have room in my heart for blame. Only fury. I took a deep breath, the paper crumbling slightly in my fist. "We're not waiting. We're not negotiating. We're getting him back." My husband looked up. His eyes were red, raw. "How?" "Amanda. They took him without anyone seeing. They planned this. They knew exactly when to strike. Because someone in this community is still feeding them information," I said, voice shaking but firm. "Someone who knows our routines. Someone who knew we'd be at court today." My husband nodded. "The leak. We had suspected it for weeks. Now we had proof. But a leak wasn't my biggest concern. My son was out there, and Rick had him." The sheriff's SUV screeched into the driveway within minutes. Parker stepped out before the engine even shut off. He took one look at my face and knew. "Where's Ethan?" he asked. I handed him the note. He read it once, jaw tightening. Then again, and again, slower, deeper. "This isn't random," he said. "This was coordinated. And they're not hiding anymore. They're making demands." "What do they want?" I asked. "We don't know yet," he said, "but we're going to find out." He snapped orders to his deputies. "Seal the perimeter, canvass neighbors, check every camera, every footprint, every vehicle that came through." Within minutes, our quiet ranch turned into a full-blown investigation zone. But I didn't wait for them. I marched into the kitchen and grabbed my phone. I had one person left to call. One person who might know something. "Tina." She answered on the first ring. Her voice was shaky. "Amanda, I saw the news. I heard about the court. Are you okay?" "No," I said bluntly. "They took Ethan." She gasped. "What? How?" I thought. "No time," I snapped. "Listen to me. You said you overheard conversations. You said they talked about taking leverage before. Do you know where they might have gone?" Silence. Then there was a place. They mentioned an old mill. Something about moving the last of the crates through the mill if things went bad. I don't know where, but it sounded like it wasn't abandoned, like someone else was running it. "A mill," I repeated. "Where?" "I'll text you the only thing I remember, a crossroad sign. It was on one of their maps. I didn't understand it then, but maybe it helps now. Send it." She did within seconds. A screenshot of a faded hand-drawn map on a dirty table. 2 lines crossing. Red Oak Road and Hunter's Bend Lane. I felt my pulse quicken. "Got it." I whispered. "Amanda," Tina said, voice trembling. "Don't go alone. You fight hard, but these guys fight dirty. They don't care about rules. They don't care about who they hurt. I'm not afraid of them anymore." "You should be." I took the map straight to Parker. His reaction was instant. "I know that place," he said. "It's 2 counties over. Used to be a lumber mill before it shut down 15 years ago. No one's supposed to be there. That means they're there now, I said, and they have my son. He rubbed his chin. If this is their new base, they'll be heavily armed. We can't just run in. We need Sh0t. We need drones. And we need a warrant. We don't have time, I snapped. He's 13, Sheriff. 13. Every minute he's there. He held up a hand. I know, and I'm on your side. But if we do this wrong, they'll disappear again and take Ethan with them. I didn't want logic. I wanted my son. But logic was all I had. Then move fast, I said through clenched teeth. We will, he promised. The next hours crawled by like a slow death. Deputies combed the entire ranch, looking for tracks, tire marks, signs of struggle. They found nothing. No footprints. No shell casings. No broken branches. It was like Ethan had been snatched by ghosts. I walked the property with my husband, scanning every inch, every shadow. Then something caught my eye near the chicken coop. A single piece of duct tape, stuck to the fence. I peeled it off. Embedded in the adhesive was a fiber. Not clothing. Not rope. Dog fur. White dog fur. My breath caught. This isn't Zeus. I whispered. My husband frowned. Then whose? I looked at the barn wall, where we had replaced the boards to cover the threat, where the note about not making it to court had been sprayed. Next to the wall was a new mark. Not paint. A small, almost invisible chalk line. The kind Native American trackers used decades ago to mark directions silently. I followed the chalk line down, across the boards, and found another, and another. A trail, leading toward the creek. Sheriff. I shouted. Over here. Parker ran over. What is it? They left a trail. His eyes widened. Are you sure? This looks like a code, I said. A message. Someone's telling us where to go. Someone from inside the network? Or someone who wants out? I grabbed my jacket. I'm following it. Parker grabbed my arm. Not alone. We don't have time to wait for backup. He sighed a long, frustrated sigh. Give me 5 minutes. 5. And we'll go together. I nodded. The trail led us to the creek, where the footprints finally emerged. Small ones. Light. Not made by one of the men. These were Ethan's. My knees nearly buckled. He walked through here, Parker said, but he wasn't running. He was being led. I whispered, not dragged. Probably at gunpoint. We followed the tracks until they reached the road. Then they changed. 2 sets of deeper prints. Adult size. Boots. A vehicle had waited there. A large one from the size of the tire tracks. Then Parker crouched. Wait, he said. There are 2 sets of adult footprints and 1 set of dog prints. I froze. Dog prints. He nodded. Big ones. My heart twisted. But Zeus is... It's not Zeus, he said softly. It's another dog. Someone brought a dog with them. But why? He stood. His face was tense. Because they didn't want Ethan screaming, he said. Dogs can be used to intimidate. Or to comfort a kid who's scared. My stomach turned. What does that mean? It means, he said slowly, they're using psychological tactics. They're trained. And they're not planning to kill him quickly. I closed my eyes. A wave of nausea hit me. Not from fear, but from rage. I refused to let my son be used like that. By sunset, a full tactical team was assembled. Drones, armored vans, snipers, even K-9 units. But I wasn't staying behind. I suited up in the sheriff's van beside Parker. He didn't argue this time. You're coming, he said, handing me a bulletproof vest. But you stay glued to me. I nodded. As we drove toward the abandoned mill, the radio crackled with updates from drones overhead. Thermal signatures detected multiple. Movement inside the main structure. Possible animal heat signatures. My heart pounded. Then the radio clicked again. We found a boy. Possible match. He's inside. I gasped. My husband squeezed my hand. So hard it hurt. We're coming, Ethan. I whispered. We reached the mill just before dusk. Its rusty tower rising like a haunted skeleton in the fading light. Windows shattered. Roof sagging. But inside, lit. Generators running. Voices. Dogs barking. The red ditch network had been hiding in plain sight. We approached silently, moving through tall grass. Flashlights off. A deputy opened the hatch to the basement level. We stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Diesel, sweat, fear. Then I heard something. A soft whimper. A sniffle. My heart jolted. Ethan. I moved toward the sound, Parker behind me, when suddenly a gunshot exploded. Concrete dust rained from the ceiling. Down! We dropped. The mill roared to life as doors slammed and boots thundered across the floor. Rick's voice echoed from above. "Welcome to the end of your crusade. Amanda," Parker whispered urgently. "Stay behind cover." But then I heard it. The worst sound in the world. Ethan screaming. "Mom. MOM, help." I bolted up before Parker could stop me. I sprinted toward the stairs, ignoring the shouts, ignoring the gunshots, ignoring everything except that voice. I reached the second-floor catwalk. There he was, Ethan, tied to a metal chair, a big white dog pacing beside him, not attacking him, guarding him, and behind them, Rick, gun in hand, eyes wild. But something else caught my eye. Behind Rick, in the shadows, another figure, tall, wearing a baseball cap, pulled low, holding a phone pointed right at Ethan. Recording. "Don't move," Rick shouted. "Not unless you want the next headline to be about a grieving ranch mom." Parker and the deputies took positions below, shouting commands. I raised my hand slowly. "No one needs to get hurt," I said. Rick smirked. "Oh, someone already has." Then he snapped his fingers. The dog growled, and the shadowy figure stepped forward. It was Karen's ex-husband, a man we thought had left the state years ago. He smiled cold and cruel. "You ruined everything," he sneered. "Now you're going to fix it." Before I could respond, he lifted his foot and kicked the chair Ethan was tied to over the catwalk edge. My son fell, and the world went black. Time slowed. I saw the moment my son fell, his body strapped to a chair, toppling backward over the edge of the catwalk. My scream tore from my throat like it had been caged inside me for years. "Ethan!" The room exploded into motion. I lunged forward. No thought, no logic, just instinct. Desperate to reach the edge before he hit the concrete floor below. But someone else moved faster. The big white dog. With a deep growl and explosive speed, it leapt over the rail after Ethan, a blur of muscle and fur. And then, crash! Metal. Screaming. With splinters. The chair hit the ground hard, flipping sideways, but it didn't slam. The dog had broken Ethan's fall. I clambered down the steps 2 at a time, legs barely working. By the time I reached him, deputies had cleared the area and subdued Rick and Karen's ex-husband. Clear. We got them restrained. I didn't care. I dropped to my knees next to Ethan, who was whimpering, face scratched, wrists tied. Baby, look at me." He blinked slowly. "Mom, I'm here. You're okay. I'm here." The dog, panting hard, leg injured, lay next to him, whimpering. I reached over and stroked the dog's head. "You saved him." Parker knelt beside me. "We've got EMS on the way." "You did—" "Amanda, he's safe." But I didn't feel victorious. I felt wrecked. I pulled Ethan into my arms and didn't let go for a long, long time. It took hours to process the scene. The mill had been transformed into a full-blown operations base. They found counterfeit documents, more dog collars, maps, land registry files, burner phones, weapons, everything they needed to prove this was a national network. Rick and Karen's ex-husband were part of something bigger than just rural land fraud. They were part of the Red Ditch Syndicate, a hidden web of organized land acquisition, intimidation, and blackmail. Using HOA contracts, fear tactics, and legal loopholes, they pushed out dozens of families across the Midwest and Southwest. But no more. The federal agents arrived later that night. They took custody of Rick, Karen's ex, and the remaining operatives. The white dog, later identified as a trained tactical shepherd named Ghost, was rescued and taken to a nearby vet. The sheriff promised he'd make sure Ghost found a good home. But we knew where that home would be. With us. A week later, Ethan sat on the porch, his leg in a soft brace. Ghost curled beside him. "Do you think Zeus sent him?" he asked. I smiled, brushing his hair from his face. I like to think Zeus taught him everything he needed to know. Ethan nodded. Then he did good. We both sat quietly, watching the sun rise over the pasture, the same pasture that started all this, the same land Karen had tried to give away. But now, it was officially ours. All of it. 3 days after the rescue, I stood in federal court again. This time, not to plead, but to witness. Karen's trial began swiftly, the evidence irrefutable. She sat in silence, eyes hollow, hair unkempt. She didn't speak a word as the prosecution listed her crimes: fraud, collusion, accessory to kidnapping, accessory to attempted murder, and conspiracy against the state. She was sentenced to 48 years without parole. Rick and Karen's ex-husband got 60 each. No reaction, no remorse, just empty faces. People who once thought fear could build empires. In the weeks that followed, life began to return to normal. Neighbors brought food, repaired fences, painted barns. The HOA, now restructured with proper oversight, passed a new motion. No future land deals can proceed without 100% community consent. No more loopholes. No more hidden contracts. No more silent approvals. The ranchers of Willow Bend had learned their lesson and had become guardians of one another. Hal Morgan stepped down from interim president and handed the baton to Mrs. Lacey, an elderly widow known for her sweet tea and sharper wit. "Let's keep the HOA about chickens and fences from now on," she said at her swearing-in. "Not crime syndicates." Everyone laughed. The first real laugh in months. Ethan's story went viral. News outlets picked it up, calling him the boy who survived a syndicate. But he hated the title. "I'm not a survivor," he said. "I'm just someone who had a really brave dog." Ghost became his official therapy dog, registered and trained with local support. Wherever Ethan went, school, church, grocery store, Ghost went too. And when Ethan stood on stage at the local elementary school to give a talk on bravery, he held up two pictures, one of Zeus and one of Ghost. "These are my heroes," he said. "And my mom." I wept in the back row. The house grew quieter in the months after. Peaceful, secure, but it was never the same. You don't go through something like that and walk away unchanged. I started a blog, The Fence Line, a place where rural families could share their HOA horror stories, where lawyers offered free help, where watchdogs monitored bad boar behavior. We had over 400,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Then came the calls. CNN, Good Morning America, Netflix, they all wanted the story. I said no to all of them until PBS came calling, because they weren't interested in the drama. They were interested in the reform, in the message, and that's what I wanted the world to hear. That one small ranch, one family, one shepherd could unravel something hidden, something terrifying, something real, and still stand tall, still be home, still win. One last thing, about that grave under the oak tree, we made a new one beside it, for Ghost, not because he was gone, but because he earned the spot, right beside the dog who started it all. We engraved both stones with the same line: protector of this land, guardian of this boy, good dog. Then, on a quiet morning, Ethan added something beneath, in his own handwriting. "You didn't just bark, you bit back." And that's what we did. We bit back. We stood our ground. And we'll keep doing it. For every rancher, every family, every kid who just wants to sleep peacefully in their home without fearing the people meant protected. That's what it means to be ranch strong. That's what it means to be home. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments.